The envelope was small, unassuming, plain white, but the weight it carried inside would rock Harry to his core. It wasn't the kind of envelope you found in the post and ignored. No, this was the kind of envelope that could unravel decades of careful secrecy, family reputation, and personal trust. And it had Harry's name written on it, not in his handwriting, not in some polite palace script. It was scrawled in sharp, almost aggressive letters, like someone wanted to make sure he understood exactly who it was for. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Harry stared at it, his pulse quickening. He knew MI6 didn't send correspondence for nothing. Whatever was inside this envelope wasn't ordinary. It wasn't some intelligence briefing or routine security notice. This was personal and dangerous. He opened it slowly, almost theatrically, though every nerve in his body was screaming at him to tear it open. Inside, there was a single folder. The kind you'd see in spy movies, the kind labeled with a name that would make the world gasp if it ever escaped the walls of the palace. Meghan Markle. That alone might have been shocking enough. But as he flipped through the documents, his eyes landed on something that made him freeze mid-breath. A marriage certificate. Not his. Not some celebrity gossip article floating around tabloids. This was official, signed, dated, legal, and the name next to hers made Harry's blood run cold. Joe Guiliano. The room seemed to shrink around him. The walls of the palace office, the place where so many generations of royals had dealt with crises, threats, and scandals, suddenly felt like a trap. How could this exist? How could MI6 have found it? And why hadn't Meghan ever mentioned this? Harry's mind raced. He tried to recall every conversation, every moment, every seemingly innocent detail. And now it all started to twist into a pattern he hadn't been prepared to see. Questions piled up faster than answers. Who was Joe Guiliano? Why had this marriage certificate been hidden from him? Were there other secrets? And most importantly, what did this mean for the life he thought he was building with Meghan? The palace had rules, protocols, rules about discretion, decorum, and appearances. But Harry was in no mood for protocol. He slammed the envelope onto the desk. The sound echoed like a gunshot. His face was flushed, his hands trembling, not from anger, but from the shock of betrayal. The MI6 stamp on the folder seemed to mock him. They had found this. They had it all. As he sifted through the rest of the documents, more questions emerged. Not just about this certificate, but about timing, context, and implications. The dates didn't line up neatly. There were references to previous addresses, previous witnesses, even confidential mentions of events Harry had never heard of. It was as if an entire hidden chapter of Meghan's life had been discovered, neatly packaged, and delivered straight to him. He couldn't believe it. Not at first. He read the certificate again, and again. Then he called one of his closest confidants within the palace. Not a family member, not a press secretary, but someone he trusted to give him raw, unfiltered advice. "Are you seeing this?" he whispered into the phone, voice shaking. "MI6, they found it. It's real. Joe Guiliano. 3 husbands. All of it." There was silence on the other end. Then, finally, a low, incredulous response. "Harry, this is massive." And that was an understatement. Harry thought back to the moments leading up to this discovery. The casual conversations with Meghan, the appearances in public, the laughter, the seemingly unbreakable bond. Were they all lies? Was there a truth hidden beneath layers of charm and secrecy? His stomach churned. The betrayal felt immediate, visceral, a knife twisting slowly in his chest. Yet, amid the anger and shock, there was also a flicker of something else, curiosity. He had to know everything. Every date, every document, every witness. And MI6 had it all. That was both terrifying and intoxicating. The idea that an intelligence agency, trained in uncovering secrets that most of the world would never imagine, had been tracking this, keeping it under wraps until now, made the stakes feel even higher. Harry's mind jumped forward. What would the press say? How would the tabloids spin it? How would the royal family react if this ever leaked? The thought alone made him clench his fists. Because this wasn't just a private issue anymore. This had the potential to shake not only his life, but the entire monarchy. But here's where it got even more complicated. As he studied the documents, he realized that the certificate was only one piece of a puzzle. There were notes, references, and subtle annotations suggesting there were more layers yet to be revealed. Something that MI6 had uncovered that went beyond a simple marriage certificate. Something explosive. And then it hit him. A name was listed in a marginal note. A name that sent shivers down his spine. A name that connected not just to Meghan's past, but potentially to people Harry had never even suspected. The implications were enormous. This wasn't just personal, it was political. It was legal. And it could endanger everything he thought he knew about loyalty, love, and family. The palace corridors felt colder that evening. Harry couldn't focus on the ceremonial duties, the scripted appearances, or the polite smiles that were expected of him. His mind kept circling back to that envelope, to that certificate, and to the secrets it represented. He thought about conversations he'd had with Meghan, conversations that now seemed loaded with hidden meanings, questions he hadn't even known to ask. And yet, no one outside this inner circle knew. The world would never suspect that behind the polished public image, a storm was brewing. But Harry felt it in every fiber of his being. The storm was real, and it was about to hit. Finally, he sat back, took a deep breath, and asked himself a question he wasn't sure he wanted the answer to. How many more secrets are there? Because this certificate, this one unassuming piece of paper, was only the beginning. And as the camera would metaphorically pan out on this scene, there was one fact that couldn't be ignored. Harry was about to confront not just Meghan's past, but a hidden reality that would challenge everything he believed about love, trust, and family. The moment Harry realized what MI6 had uncovered, he felt a tidal wave of emotions crashing over him all at once. Shock, disbelief, anger, betrayal, and something darker, a profound sense of humiliation. Not in front of the public, not even in front of Meghan, but somewhere far more intimate, within the walls of the palace, surrounded by aides and advisors who had seen him as calm, composed, in control. He slammed the folder onto the polished oak desk. The sound reverberated through the room like a warning bell. The room had been quiet a second ago, the hush of evening settling over the corridors, the soft rustle of papers, the faint click of antique clocks. But now, it seemed as if everything had shifted. The air itself seemed to stiffen. One of his closest aides, a man who had worked alongside him since his teenage years, looked up from his notes. He had never seen Harry like this. Not the tense, impatient Harry of duty. Not the polite, diplomatic Harry trained for public appearances. No, this Harry was raw, unfiltered, furious, and utterly human. "Sir, are you all right?" the aide asked cautiously, his voice almost faltering. Harry didn't respond at first. He opened the folder again, flipping the pages with deliberate precision, almost as if rereading them would somehow make them disappear. But they didn't. They were real, legal, binding, signed, and the name, Joe Guiliano, stared back at him like a neon warning sign, impossible to ignore. He could feel the blood rising in his neck, the tension coiling in his chest. How could this exist? How could she not have told him? His thoughts spun in a furious spiral. He remembered the wedding planning, the moments of intimacy, the promises whispered under the veil of privacy. And now, suddenly, they felt incomplete, fragmented, shattered. He stormed down the corridor, folder in hand, moving past portraits of generations of royals who had faced scandal, intrigue, and betrayal. But none, he realized, quite like this. None had the personal sting, the emotional punch of someone you trusted entirely, keeping something so massive from you. He reached a quiet sitting room, the kind where private discussions often took place away from prying eyes. Here, he set the folder down on a small marble table and leaned over it, head in hands, pacing slightly. His aides gave him space, sensing the storm brewing. This isn't just a piece of paper, he muttered to himself. This is a history I never knew. And now I have to deal with it. The words barely left his mouth before anger took over. How could Meghan, someone he thought he knew entirely, keep a secret like this? A secret that MI6 could uncover, that had been carefully hidden for years? And why was it even necessary? The questions burned in his mind, each one a tiny spark feeding a growing inferno. He thought about the public image they had maintained, the smiles, the appearances, the hand-holding, the carefully curated moments that had convinced the world they were a perfect couple. And now, Now it all seemed like a carefully constructed illusion. A stage play in which he had been both actor and audience, unaware of the true plot. Then came the practical thoughts, the unavoidable realities. The press, the social media storm that would erupt the second this surfaced. The tabloids, already hungry for royal scandal, would paint him as naive, oblivious, and, worst of all, publicly humiliated. The palace would face scrutiny. Advisors would scramble. Allies would whisper. Enemies would strike. And Harry, standing in that quiet room, felt the first pang of panic mixed with fury. Fury at the betrayal. Fury at the secrecy. Fury at the world for even knowing about Joe Guiliano before he did. He thought back to conversations with Meghan. Moments of trust, moments of laughter, moments where he had shared his deepest fears and desires. And now they felt tainted, rewritten by this new information. Was anything real? Was he imagining the bond they shared, or had it been partially a carefully orchestrated facade? Even as his mind raced, a darker question emerged. Were there more secrets? MI6 had discovered this certificate, yes, but how much more did they hold? What else had been hidden from him? Harry's pulse quickened as he considered the implications. This wasn't merely about the past. It was about control, power, and trust. And all of that was now in jeopardy. Harry's fury wasn't silent. It was a low, simmering fire at first, but it soon erupted into sharp words, delivered not to Meghan. She wasn't here, but to the aides who had been quietly observing him. Why wasn't I told? He demanded, voice low but laced with raw intensity. Why is this only coming to light now? Do you have any idea what this does to me, to us, to everything? The aides shifted uncomfortably. Their loyalty was unquestioned, but words failed them. This wasn't a diplomatic crisis or a public relations nightmare. They were witnessing a personal earthquake, the kind that leaves fissures in trust and confidence alike. Harry's breathing grew heavier. His mind raced through scenarios. Should he confront Meghan? Should he demand answers now? Or should he wait, gather more information, and plan a carefully calculated response? Every option seemed loaded with risk, every choice a potential disaster. And yet, beneath the rage and panic, there was also clarity. This wasn't just about betrayal, it was about truth. The truth, as painful as it might be, had a right to be known. He couldn't let this slide. He couldn't ignore MI6's discovery. And, most importantly, he couldn't pretend that nothing had happened. The room was quiet again, but the tension hung like a thick fog. Harry paced, occasionally glancing at the certificate, almost afraid it would vanish if he looked away. He read the name again, and the reality sank deeper. Joe Guiliano. 3 husbands. Hidden past. Legal proof. All of it. And the world didn't yet know. The silence was shattered by the sound of a phone vibrating on the side table. Harry picked it up, hand trembling slightly, and saw a message from a palace aide. Sir, what do you want to do next? The question was deceptively simple, but Harry felt its weight. Every decision now carried consequences, personal, public, and political. And every second he hesitated allowed rumors, whispers, and media speculation to grow louder in the background. Harry's jaw tightened. He knew this was just the beginning. MI6 had opened a door. And once a door like this is opened, there's no closing it. Secrets, lies, and truths long buried would come rushing out. And no one, not even him, would be prepared for the fallout. He finally sat down, gripping the certificate, and whispered under his breath, "How many more secrets are there?" It was a question he wasn't sure he wanted the answer to. But deep down, he knew he'd have to find out. Because MI6 had just handed him the key to a door he couldn't unsee. And on the other side of that door lay revelations that would shake the royal family to its core, ignite media chaos, and force Harry to confront truths he had never imagined. When the name Joe Guiliano first appeared on that MI6 document, it felt like a jolt of lightning to Harry's system. He had read it over and over, hoping that the mind could trick itself into disbelief, that some mistake had been made. But the certificate was official. Every signature, every date, every seal screamed legality. Joe Guiliano was real, and so was his connection to Meghan Markle. But who was he? That was the first question Harry asked himself, pacing the quiet corridor outside his private chambers. He didn't have long before whispers began spreading among palace aides. When a storm of this magnitude starts, The first leaks rarely come from outside, they start inside. And if anyone else started asking questions about Joe Guiliano, the palace hierarchy could find themselves tangled in scandal they couldn't control. Harry needed answers. He needed context. And he needed it fast. Joe Guiliano was, at first glance, unremarkable. Not a public figure, not a socialite, not a celebrity. Just a man whose name appeared on a legal document and whose presence in Meghan's past had remained invisible until now. But as Harry dug deeper, reviewing what MI6 had compiled, a much more complex picture emerged. He learned that Joe was quietly wealthy, well-connected in certain circles, and professionally successful, but not in a way that would attract mainstream media attention. His name didn't appear in tabloid headlines. He wasn't a familiar name in Hollywood parties or British social columns. And yet, for someone who had supposedly shared a life with Meghan, Joe's footprint was subtle but undeniable. Every address, every reference, every footnote in MI6's files painted a picture of a man who had been there, quietly, influencing, connecting, observing. The certificate alone raised questions, but MI6's notes hinted at more. Correspondence, travel records, and subtle references to meetings between Meghan and Joe that overlapped with other periods of her life. It wasn't scandalous in the tabloid sense, but the timing, the secrecy, the sheer fact that it had remained hidden from Harry made it explosive in his eyes. Why was he hidden? Harry whispered aloud, pacing his private office late into the night. The aides had long since left, leaving him alone with the certificate, the folder, and the swirling storm in his head. Why wasn't this ever mentioned? And what else is hidden? He tried to recall conversations with Meghan, offhand comments, casual mentions, jokes that now felt loaded with meaning. Every memory was suddenly suspect. Every laugh, every glance, every affectionate word carried a shadow he hadn't noticed before. Harry realized that knowing about Joe Guiliano changed everything. Not just the past, it reshaped his understanding of Meghan herself.